Happy days are here again. No. I saw some of you smiling during that scripture passage, so we'll have to talk about that later. Today our reading is from the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and it directs our focus back many hundreds of years to 8th century BCE. Here among the prophets we find many passionate speeches. Today's passage is from the book of Amos, as you just heard read. The prophet Amos writes at a time of prosperity and relative stability in Jewish history. In 732 or thereabouts, I hope I've got that right, the conquest of Damascus by Assyria had removed a major enemy of Israel, and Israel was able to expand to close to the size it was at the time of King Solomon. So it's kind of pleasant, more what am I thinking of? Calm, stable, but also people have more and they use more. I can't think of the word for that.
Prosperous?
Thank you, Steve. And you were one of the smilers, so. And Israel was able to expand. In Amos's time, there was a greater sense of security among the people of Israel. Amos, however, was not lulled into contentment by the relative comfort of the social order around him. He saw that beneath the outward peace and calm, there was a destructive inequality at the heart of this society. There was widespread cheating in business. Government officials were frequently and easily bribed. The rich were self-indulgent. The poor were forgotten and mistreated. Religion had become all outward show, shallow and meaningless and incapable of morally directing human life. Sounds all too familiar, doesn't it? Amos's words were not comforting or uplifting, but ominous and dark. He would not get far in politics today, for he confronts the leaders and social elite with condemnations like, "Ah, you that turn justice to wormwood and bring righteousness to the ground." And with questions like, "Is not the day of the Lord darkness, not light, and gloom with no brightness in it?" And declarations like, I despise your festivals." That seems kind of over the top, doesn't it? But when it's in the hypocrisy, it's more offensive. "Take away from me the noise of your songs." As a leader today, he would probably be advised to fire his speechwriters and start over. These words were not going to help him rise to power, but Amos was a prophet in the old tradition of prophecy. He wasn't trying to win a popularity contest or an election, to amass great wealth or rule like a king over a nation. Prophets stay on the fringes of society, beholden to no one but God and their conscience. Amos was a sheep breeder by trade, and his name, like so many biblical names, had a specific and important meaning. Amos meant burden bearer. Burden bearer. The task of speaking out with bad news is never a coveted one, like the doctor who must inform the patient that he or she has a life-threatening disease, or a government official who knocks on the door of a fallen soldier to inform his or her family of their loss, or a scientist who has to speak out disturbing truth about climate change and its devastating consequences, or a representative in government who speaks about dangers to our nation or corruption in our leaders, even in their own party. Their tasks are often burdensome, but tasks that must be done not for their own, but for the collective good. No doubt Amos was tormented by what he saw and felt compelled to say such things as, "The society is collapsing from within. You cannot go on this way. The center has arrogance and rottenness that will not hold." And history proved that he was right. Like the other biblical prophets, Amos believed there was a moral law built into the created order that could no more be violated than a natural law we might hold today, like the law of gravity. When you drop an object, it will fall to the ground. When these moral laws were ignored, human beings would eventually suffer the consequences. He bore the burden of speaking this scathing and unpopular truth out loud. It is that bearing of the burden, that mark of insight and courage to speak it, that deserves the title prophet. We live in a tumultuous time in which strong voices of necessary and collective wisdom find too little expression and too little audience. There's a deep need for recognition of the responsibility for the citizenry to hear and bear the burden of truth, the hypocrisy, the inequality, the dangerous challenges that lie ahead and must be faced for real and positive change to occur, for wars and conflicts to be brought to their proper endings, for financial stability to be regained, for relationships between nations and within this nation, between political parties to be repaired, for the conservation of energy and for the development of new energy sources, for a healthcare system adequate to the needs of this nation's peoples, for affordable homes, education for all, and for the compassionate treatment of refugees and immigrants. An American historian, Richard Hofstadter, in writing about the character of Abraham Lincoln, expressed something of the same sense of gravity and hard-heartedness which face our leaders and people today with these words. So this is what Hofstadter wrote about Lincoln. Lincoln's rage for personal success, his external and worldly ambition, was quieted when he entered the White House, and he was left alone to reckon with himself, to be confronted with the fruits of his victory, only to find that it meant choosing between life and death for others, was immensely sobering. In one of his rare moments of self-revelation, he's reported to have said, "Now, I don't know what the soul is, but whatever it is, I know that it can humble itself." For Lincoln, it was impossible to drift into the habitual callousness of the sort of officialdom that sees men and women only as pawns to be shifted here and there and expended at the will of others. Here, perhaps, is the best measure of Lincoln's personal eminence in the human calendar, that he was chastened and not intoxicated by power. Chastened and not intoxicated by power. Lincoln, like the prophet Amos, became aware of and sensitive to the dire situation that confronted him and the sacrifices that it would require of him. He too was a burden bearer. As the Civil War unfolded, the entire nation would be called to share in this burden, and I mean to really share the lives of their children. As the Civil War unfolded, the entire nation paying a heart-wrenching price to move beyond social and economic welfare economic system that necessitated the slavery of some to ensure the comfort and welfare of others. And it was important to the South to have slavery. Their economic system couldn't function without it. I mean, they depended on this covenant with the devil, if you want to say, in order to keep themselves going. The Bible is not only full of words and actions of God, but the history of a people. If one is sufficiently humble and willing to face their own demons, they'll be able to find many similarities between these very human stories of an ancient society, even though they talk about them differently with a lot more these and thous and Lord and that kind of stuff, and our own modern versions of this. However proud and great a nation, there are always, to some degree or another, skeletons that must be brought out of the closets of history, policy, institutions, and customs, hypocrisies that must be confronted, agonizing challenges that must be faced, for nations are made of human beings, noble, virtuous, hardworking, and visionary, and dishonorable, self-serving, lazy, and short-sighted. Most of us are, of course, a mixture of all of these. Amos the burden bearer was called by God to speak his unpleasant truth. God is a God who demands justice and is sickened by veneration of a system that ignores unjust economic reality. God has deep love and concern for those who are exploited by human systems and actions, the poor, the powerless, the discounted. God cannot be placated with holy words when our actions contradict them. Greed and dishonesty, corruption, and a false sense of security must be confronted. Simply and poetically put, God calls all people and all peoples who want to be in a sacred relationship to God to let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Don't we have the right to expect of our own leaders, presidents, senators, representatives to Congress, highest court judges, to see their jobs as the leaders of the free world, to be that of burden bearers? It's not a game we play. You are taking on a responsibility that makes your hair gray. I recently read Ronald Reagan's final speech as president in his farewell address to the nation in 1989. Commenting on the moniker that had been given him, the Great Communicator, Reagan said, "I wasn't a great communicator, but I communicated great things. And they didn't spring full bloom from my brow. They came from the heart of a great nation, from our experience, our wisdom, our belief in the principles that have guided us for 2 centuries." Then toward the end of his remarks, I found this excerpt. "I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans and windswept, God blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here." And in Barack Obama's 2006 book, The Audacity of Hope, the then Senator Obama described the thoughts he had as he took his evening run past the Lincoln Memorial in order to clear his head. "At night, the great shrine is lit, but often empty. Standing between marble columns, I read the Gettysburg Address and the second inaugural address. And I look out over the reflecting pool, imagining the crowd stilled by Dr. King's mighty cadence, and then beyond that to the flood-lit obelisk and shining Capitol dome. And in that place, I think about America and those who built it, the nation's founders who somehow rose above petty ambitions and narrow calculations to imagine a nation unfolding across a continent. And those like Lincoln and King who ultimately laid down their lives in the service of perfecting an imperfect union. And all the faceless, nameless men and women, slaves and soldiers, tailors and butchers, constructing lives for themselves and their children and grandchildren, brick by brick, rail by rail, calloused hand by calloused hand, to fill in the landscape of our collective dreams. In that process, I wish to be. It is that process I wish to be a part of. My heart is filled with love for this country. So my prayer for the nation in 2025 is that more and more of us will seek to become part of the dream and the process to which Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama and many other U.S. presidents and government officials have referred to throughout the years. I pray that the deep love and respect for our nation and for its people shown in the better parts of our best leaders, can be rekindled in us all. Republicans and Democrats, Christians, Jews and Muslims, black and white and brown, rich and poor, young and old, native born and immigrant, gay and straight, men and women. My prayer is that in the months ahead, we might feel and accept our calling to be burden bearers. Now, I am with you, gang. We've talked a lot. It's hard to turn on the news and even know what's going on, and we got enough burden just getting the yard mowed and a whole lot of other things going on. But we too, as citizens of a democracy, are burden bearers. So we need to take the necessary risks to share in the agonizingly difficult and yet profoundly rewarding task that this calling demands of us. My prayer is that we are able to take within us the spirit of the prophet Amos's words. Let's say them together. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. For our time, like Amos's time, is also an historic one. Amen.